I've heard our next generation pastor, Tim Blake, describe our current culture as a culture of outrage, where it's just so easy for people to be outraged by something. Having said that, when I think about this moment that's captured in all four of the gospel accounts of Jesus coming into the temple and forming a whip and driving out the animals that were being sold for sacrifice, and turning over tables and coins going everywhere, and just driving animals and people, and just kind of, well, we call it, the holy version is, it's called the temple cleansing. But to me, it's just, when you really think about that, it is the most outrageous thing we could imagine someone that we would call the Son of God doing. As I sit here in our worship center here at Hickory Grove, when I think about this account of Jesus doing that, I liken it unto, Jesus just kind of coming into church on a Sunday and then just kind of turning things over and stopping everything. And I mean, just kind of, whoa, capturing this moment, this thing that happened, this Passover meal, this Passover feast that happened there in Jerusalem. I mean, he made a scene, and it was a crazy scene. And you imagine if that happened today and someone captured it on their cell phone and posted it, and, just here's this guy that some were saying might be the Messiah, and he's driving out the animals, turning over tables, that he's kind of causing an uproar and an outbreak or a riot there in the temple. Well, in this current culture, we would crucify Jesus on social media, and that's an ironic way to say that. But that's why I think we need to pause and think about this thing that Jesus did, and why did he do this? Why did he do this outrageous thing during the Passover meal? And to sum it up real quickly in just two statements. One, his house, his rules. He was revealing himself to be the authority. He was revealing himself to be God himself, because really only God himself had the authority to jump into that temple and do that crazy stuff that was being done. I mean, because this had become kind of the way of life in this Passover meal. They were selling the cattle and the animals that for sacrifice, and for some it was kind of out of convenience because people made very long pilgrimages to the temple. And so why not, instead of bringing your own animals to sacrifice, you could buy them there. Maybe there's a whole sermon there about how worship isn't supposed to be out of complete convenience or something like that. But the truth of the matter is that these people selling these animals there in the temple courts were upcharging and making it very expensive for the poor, the widows, to be able to take part in those sacrifices and the worship that was taking place in the temple. In addition to that, people were making money off changing Roman currency to temple currency. You would not want to take the Roman coins, which had pagans on it, and it would just not be used in the temple worship. So it was an opportunity. It was very opportunistic to be able to work in the temple courts and to be able to make money off of that. In addition to that, this was the court of the Gentiles, and this was supposed to be a place where prayer was happening, and instead it was like the New York Stock Exchange. So Jesus shows up in the temple, and he wreaks havoc. I mean, he goes crazy. He does something very outrageous because that was his Father's house. His house, his rules. And it's just a reminder to us of the sovereign lordship of God in our lives. We need to pay attention to when he does something outrageous, he's trying to show us something, and he's trying to remind us that he really is in charge, and there's something he wants to show us in that. And I tell you, it was a revelation of the way the Jewish leaders of that day were literally leading people into something about God that just wasn't true and just wasn't accurate. Jesus came onto the scene to reveal God for who he really, really was. And it was only the beginning, because as he died on that cross and rose from the grave, there was even more he was about to teach us about the sacrifice and the love and the mercy and the grace and the lordship of God. But not only did he teach us that in that moment, but he reminds us of something that's just very, very true, that our wake-up requires his shake-up. In order for us to be woken to what God wants to show us and do in our lives, sometimes it requires an enormous shakeup. I don't know about you guys. I'm a deep sleeper. And so in order for me to wake up, sometimes, I got to have alarm and I got to hit snooze 2 or 3 times. I don't even remember the first 2 times I hit snooze sometimes. I'm a deep sleeper. And I think sometimes spiritually we can be deep sleepers, and it requires a big shakeup in our lives for us to be awakened to what God is trying to do in our lives. And what's really cool about what happened there in the temple is it's in John chapter 2, in John's account of the gospel. We find right after that this leader of the Jewish people religiously, this Pharisee, this member of the Sanhedrin, which was like the Jedi Council of Judaism, Nicodemus, visits Jesus at night right after this happened. I believe that the shakeup in the temple was Nicodemus's wake up. And we find him coming onto the scene after Jesus' death and basically performing a royal burial of 75 pounds of myrrh that Nicodemus was able to do as his act of love and worship of Jesus. I believe that shakeup in the temple was Nicodemus's wake up. And I just wonder if maybe Jesus is performing some kind of wake-up call in your life. I know he's done many in my life. And I hope that as you discuss this together as a group, that you can talk about things like that. What wake-up calls has God given you in your life? Or maybe right now, what is the shake-up that Jesus is performing right now, that he's trying to show you something and teach you something and give you some kind of next step to take with him? Jesus' shake-up is your wake-up and my wake-up. So talk to him about that and ask him to reveal what he is doing in your life and what he wants you to do, how he wants you to respond to the shakeup that he is doing in your life. Man, it's an outrageous thing that Jesus did, but the outrageous thing that Jesus might be doing in your life right now has an outrageous purpose for your life. So discuss that together as a group and take time as you close your group time to pray about that and ask God to give you discernment of the shakeups that he is doing in your life.